resume 2963rd meeting of the committee, and it's now the turn of the delegation to respond to the follow-up questions and questions posed in relation to the second part of the list of issues, that's to say 14 to 25. So without more ado, I give the floor to Ms. Chan to organize the responses from her delegation. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the questions that were raised in the first part of this session from our distinguished members. So I will invite later on my colleagues to respond to the questions. But Mr. Chairman, allow me to start with responding the questions raised by some of the distinguished members about the political system of Macau. China, on December 1999, has informed the Secretary General of the United Nations as a depository entity that the ICCPR would continue to be applicable to Macau SAR, including the reserve about the political system. Actually, Portugal, when has extended the covenant to Macau in 1992, also they had made actually this reservation of Article 25B of the covenant was made initially by Portugal at the time when the covenant was extended to Macau. And the intention of the reservation is to maintain the election structure and the electoral system, both of the LESCO, composed of direct, indirect, and appoint members, and the election for the chief executive by an election committee. So we would like to emphasize that the central government of the PRC made 4 declarations which conform to the regulations concern of international law pursuant to the relevant provisions of the Macau Basic Law. The constitutions of the People's Republic of China and the Macau Basic Law that Macau is an autonomous administrative region of the PRC according to the Article 31 of the Constitution of China. So about the political system, any decisions that is made about the structure, about the methodology, it has to be made upon the approval of the NPC of China. Actually, we have made a change of the methodology, both of the LESCO and of the election committee of the chief executive last year, as I have mentioned. So we have been approved by the NPC, and after a vast participation of our population, we have increased the numbers of seats of the LESCO by 2 direct elections, plus 2 indirect elections, and maintain the 7 appointed members. I would like to emphasize also that after the return of Macau to the PRCs in 13 years' time, the number of the legislative seats has been increased from 23 in 1999, that is the moment when the Macau SAR was established. The number of seats of the LESCO were 23, of which 8 direct, 8 indirect, and 7 appointed seats. And by this year, we will have 33 seats. That means an increase of 10 seats, or about 43% of increase in just a period of 13 years, thus realizing the gradual progress of the political system of the Macao SAR. Relating to the electoral committee for the chief executive, it has been increased from 300 to 400 members of this election committee. For the time being, since we have just made the changes, the amendments of the the methodology for electoral, both of chief executive and LegCo, we have to put all the emphasis for the elections which will be held this year for the LegCo. It is announced already that our elections for the LegCo will take place on 15th of September this year. And for next year, we will have the elections of the chief executive for the fourth mandate of the chief executive. So the government of Macau, with the approval and with the consensus of the population of Macau, we will put all our attention to have a clean and develop electoral procedures that will take place both this year or next year. But I would like to emphasize that Macau SAR, under the authorization of the NPC and with the approval of the vast majority of the population of Macau, we have a gradual and smooth democratization process for our political system. And this is consistent with the basic law, with the reality of Macau, and the approval of the NPC of China. Mr. President, you have asked also how was the consultation process, the nature of the consultation process that we have held last year. And I would like to invite Ms. Chu Lam Lam to explain to our members. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, last year, 2012, the SAR government, in order to promote the development of political structure, has held two public and consultation with the public. The first one was held at the beginning of 2012. The main purpose is to consult the society on whether it is necessary to modify the method of election of Legislative Assembly and the Chief Executive. If the public opinion agrees with the modification, what kind of principle must be abided by? Following the first round of consultation with the public, the consensus among the society was that it was necessary to modify the two methods of election. That is why in the following March and April, the SAR government carried out a longer-term consultation with the public. At that time, a document of consultation was formulated, and these documents were put on a thematic website. For this consultation, there is a special website established. Through this website, the general public can download documents or to submit their opinions on this website. These documents of consultation were provided in both Chinese and Portuguese version. Altogether, 21,034 documents were distributed among the public. In order to encourage the citizens to participate in the discussion of the constitutional development of SAR, 22,000 leaflets were published, were sent to all the citizens in SAR. In addition, through television, broadcasting, press, advertisements were made to advocate or to provide information on the constitutional development of the SAR. Government officials have also attended or participated in the programs in radio or TV programs and listened directly to the citizens' telephone consultation. In addition, in parks and communities, public forums were held with the participation of academics, the dissidents, or the government officials. In order to hear the voice of the young people in the universities, polytechnics, discussions with students were held. On the internet, discussions with the young people were held, and questions raised by the young people were directly answered. Our colleagues also went to the middle school and universities to hold seminars. Altogether, 29 seminars were held. During the whole year of 2012, different measures were taken to encourage the citizens of Macau to actively participate in this public consultation. At the end of the consultation, 165,240 submissions have been received from the consultation. This has been a record high in all the consultation we have received. This is a full demonstration of the fact that the consultation is a very extensive one. A number of members of the committee were concerned about the program of the consensus, for instance, the 2+2, and then the members of the election committee from 300 to 400, whether there is too much business interest in this modification. However, I like to point out that the two members of the Legislative Assembly were in the education and medical field, and in the members of the election committee, those seats are normally reserved for the cultural, education, and academic field. And in comparison, the seats reserved for the business is rather limited. A number of members is concerned about the registration of political groups in Macau. They ask whether the political parties must be registered under limited cooperation or the normal organizations. They ask whether there is a special law in Macau on the establishment of political groups. My answer is, according to our law 2/99/M, has a special provision on that, on the registration of political groups. The political or any groups, as long as their purposes and principles is to participate in the election, to submit ideas or suggestions on the governance, or to criticize the public administrative activities, to promote the political and education, as long as their purposes are the above mentioned, they can be registered as political groups. The only condition is they must at least have 200 permanent residents of Macau as the member. And these members must be over 18 years old and have been registered as a voter. This is to say that we have a special law on the registration of political groups. A number of members of the committee is concerned about the rights of the Portuguese descendants in Macau. According to the Basic Law, rather Article 41 of the Basic Law, Macau residents enjoy all the rights and interests guaranteed under the Macau law. That is to say, whichever nationality you have, you enjoy all the rights guaranteed by the Macau law. However, in view of the historical background of Macau, the Basic Law guaranteed the rights of the Portuguese residents. It is stipulated that the rights of the Portuguese residents in Macau are guaranteed by the Macau SAR. Their custom and cultural tradition shall be respected. Because of the historical background, there is a special article in the Basic Law to protect the interest and rights of Portuguese residents. However, there are members of the committee mentioned the fact that according to the nationality law of the People's Republic of China, China does not recognize dual nationality. It is in view of this reality and the historical background of Macau, the Standing Committee of NPC in 1998 made an interpretation on the implementation of this nationality law in the Macau SAR. In this interpretation, it is mentioned that all the Portuguese residents with Chinese origin, whether or not they possess a Portuguese travel document, they are Chinese nationals. That is to say, Macau residents with Portuguese origin, they are Chinese nationals. However, they are allowed to use the Portuguese travel documents to travel to other countries. For those Macau residents with both Chinese and Portuguese origin, according to their personal preference, they can choose either Chinese or Portuguese nationality. Before they make this choice, they also enjoy all the rights guaranteed under the Macau law. Therefore, there is no such a question as the Portuguese residents in Macau are forced to choose nationalities. Whichever nationality they choose, they enjoy all the rights enjoyed, guaranteed under the law of Macau.
Thank you. I'm going to address the issues raised by Mr. Flitterman and Mrs. Mutok regarding human trafficking and sexual exploitation. I will try to make a comprehensive response since many of the measures to fight trafficking of human persons also is linked with the problem of sex exploitation. Macau SR is strongly committed to the fight of human trafficking and continues to engage all its efforts to prevent human trafficking. As such, we have adopted a comprehensive, multidisciplinary and integrated approach to prevent and combat such phenomenon. It started at the level of institutional building. We have set up a Trafficking Deterrent Measures Concern Committee, which is an interdepartmental body and multidisciplinary. The functions and the mandate of this body is explained in paragraphs 144 of the report. So I'm not going to say again its functions. What I can say is that the mandate, the composition of this committee was enlarged this year in order to incorporate the Labor Affairs Bureau and also the Human Resources Office, which are both departments from the labor area. So now we have representatives of the security area, administration and justice, social affairs, and also from finance and economy. From a recent study done in 2011, ordered by this committee, which is responsible for the coordination and the setting of policies on the fight against TIP, Macao SAR is a transit or destiny place of TIP for the purpose mainly of sexual exploitation. So our main efforts in the recent years, since 2008, has been to combat sexual exploitation for TIP for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Although in 2012 we have set up a lot of measures also to prevent TIP for the purpose of labor exploitation. I will highlight some of the key measures that have been put into practice in order to prevent and to investigate and to prosecute TIP. We have made stricter, reinforced control at border checkpoints and visa requests to identify potential victims. We have an identification of high-risk countries where visitors or non-resident workers from such countries are given special attention at the border control points in order to detect eventual situations of trafficking. We have distributed questionnaires, more than 10,000 per year, in traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, Portuguese, and English, at immigration arrival halls or immigration services when persons are requesting a working permit or a visa. Promotion of public awareness campaigns target-oriented to potential victims have been set up as well. And these campaigns are in traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, Portuguese, English, Japanese, Korean, Thai, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Indonesian, Mongolian, and Burmese, especially at migration service where foreign workers apply for their blue card, which is a working permit, at Macao arrival halls, at the border control points, at the hospitals and health centers. The awareness campaigns include distribution of leaflets, posters, and the use of media. We also set up awareness campaigns to the general public, raising awareness as regards the potential situation of identifying victims and also awareness regarding the law on human trafficking and also reporting. Routine inspections and target raids at several black spots of potential TIP for sexual exploitation have also been carried out. Saunas, massage houses, nightclubs, bars, casinos, and other entertainment establishments. These actions are carried out in order to detect any case of TIP, procurement, illegal immigration, and at the same time to establish contacts and channels, communication channels with individuals from the entertainment business to cooperate with the police in case of any indicia of TIP and to assist in investigations. At the same time, it is a dissuasive measure in order to prevent sex trade and at the entertainment establishment in order to discourage the demand for commercial sex. Routine inspections have also been carried out at construction sites, hotels, restaurant industry, and employment agencies in order to find any source of any case of TIP for labor exploitation. But we haven't found anyone until now. We have two 24-hour hotlines, one from the police of security, from the public security police, another one from the judicial police, as well as an email complaint and claim and reporting for the judicial police of any TIP crime or any other crimes of sexual exploitation. We have set up written procedures for a communication mechanism on victims' assistance and identification between the migration officers, the public security police, the customs service, the judiciary police, the health bureau, the social welfare bureau, to the liaison office of police of the Central People's Government, to the concerned embassies and consulates. As soon as a potential victim is identified, a number of support services are immediately provided: shelter, clinical and psychological assistance, interpreter, and legal counseling. As an example, the Health Bureau has also set out written procedures to refer to the PSP, to the Public Police, social welfare, in case they suspect someone that enters in the health center or in the hospital that can be a victim, a potential victim of trafficking. There is also a close liaison mechanism that was established this year between the Labour Affairs Bureau and the Public Security Police and the Human Resources Office. Cooperation with NGOs is fundamental. They play an essential role on victims identification and also on victims assistance. Police cooperation with foreign counterparts has been strengthened through the Interpol office in Macao and also through other international organizations. Training of key officers in front lines, special migrant officers, have been undertaken since 2008, and specialized trained female police officers to interview potential female victims of TIP have also been provided for. As an example, for example, of a police action in 2012, we had an operation with Hong Kong SR police and also Guangdong authorities where 310 raids, target raids in casinos, karaoke, cyber cafes, games houses, saunas, hotels, massage, nightclubs have been carried out, involving more than 4,765 police officials. More than 9,500 people were identified, and from these people, 300 were sent to the Public Prosecutor's Office for further investigation, but no case of TIP was identified. Regarding measures on the protection and assistance to victims, Law 6/2008 established a set of rights that the victims have in case they are identified as a potential victim of TIP. First of all, to communicate with the embassy or the consulate, to have to obtain compensation for their losses and damages, to appropriate protection, to legal protection, including legal counsel and legal aid, to be assisted by a translator or interpreter, to obtain social assistance, and also to receive psychological, health, and medical care, and also confidentiality of the process regarding that person. In fact, Social Welfare Bureau has provided and is the main body to provide such assistance, namely financial, for the expenses, medical services, counseling, housing, occupational training, legal concentration, realization has been provided. And victims whose lives are in danger have been under police protection as well. We have 3 shelters, one for a male shelter that was just built recently. We have a female shelter and a minors shelter. We have two 24 hours assistance hotline to provide assistance and counseling to victims. Many of those victims, we can say that were from 2008 to 2012, we had around more than 60 victims that were assisted and provided 19 with shelter. More than 19 were provided with shelter, minors around, also around 100. But this is not only minors regarding the TIP, but also regarding other areas, other crimes that minors were provided some assistance. What do we have? We also have bilateral cooperation. We have an agreement with Mongolia on cooperation to combat trafficking in persons, especially women and children. And this agreement was signed in 2010. And also, one of the main measures is to provide safe return and reintegration of TP victims from Mongolia. However, we don't have any case yet. We have the agreement, but no case has been used. There's no concrete case to enforce yet the agreement. We also have assisted some law enforcement agents have been also attending some ILA workshops on traffic, the Bali's process. Also, we have attended many conferences and straightforward. Also strengthen some ties with Taiwan, South Korea, Japan counterparts, and Hong Kong OSRR as regarding sharing of experience, how they fight and to protect the victims, to get some experience. What is the problem regarding the victim situation and data from victims? We have, since 2008, we had In 2008, 14 cases of TIP. 2009, 5. 2010, 14. 2011, 11 cases. And 2002, 12, 15. 2008, there were 19 victims. In 9, 5 victims. In 10, 25. 2011, 11 victims. And 2012, 25 victims. Regarding what kind of remedies we provide in compensation for the victims, the problem in Macau is that the victims don't want to stay in Macau until the end of the judicial proceedings. We provide the shelter, we provide counseling, and we provide safety to ensure their safety in Macau. But the problem is the victims testify, but they want to return to their place of origin. They don't want to stay in Macau, which means that they don't stay until the end of the judicial proceedings in order to invoke their right of remedies and compensation. So there is no case that I can present to you where such redress and remedies were given and provided to victims, although our law foresees and establishes such compensation. The majority of the victims come from mainland China. We just had one victim that came from Mongolia. Regarding if the judiciary is well equipped, as was said today, we have 34 public prosecutors. We don't have any special prosecutor addressing the issue of human trafficking. It depends who is appointed on that day to be on that for the judicial proceedings. So there is no specific public prosecutors to deal with human trafficking. All our prosecutors are supposed to deal with cases that arrive on their desk, independently if it's human trafficking, sexual exploitation, or organized crime. But the number of public prosecutors is going to raise, since some of the new judiciary are coming, the new trainees are going to end in July the traineeship. Regarding data on convictions, we have some convictions already of human trafficking, and one was recently this month. This month. We have 2 individuals that were condemned, sentenced in 2008 to 7 years and 6 months and 5 years of imprisonment by TIP. In 2010, we have another individual that was sentenced to 3 years of imprisonment. And in 2013, we have 7 people that were sentenced to TIP, and the sentence were 13 years to 3 years, 13 years and 3 months for TIP procurement and TIP procurement. Another person for 13 years and 1 month for TIP and procurement, illegal immigration, and illegal shelter. Another person 13 years of TIP procurement and false declarations, and 4 persons to 12 years and 9 months for TIP and procurement. Many cases, the cases that I gave to you provide, it looks like that we don't have many cases of TIP, but I have to say that we have a lot of cases that are we have much cases investigated by the police, that the ones shown as, the ones that are accused by the Public Prosecutor's Office. According to the data from our police, we have much more cases investigated based on TIP and also on procurement. But after the investigation of the police, then it's up to the Public Prosecutor's Office to assess if there is indicia that really is a TIP case. And since it's up to the Public Prosecutor's Office to make the accusation, it's up to the Public Prosecutor's Office to assess according to the gathering of evidence if it's the TIP case or not. So sometimes there is a discrepancy between the work done by the law enforcement, which is much higher and much cases of suspicions of TIP, and then the cases which are really accused by the Public Prosecutor's Office. I'm going to summarize as much as possible, just to highlight 2 or 3 developments that we have done during 2012. For example, regarding the the question of complicity of public officials in relation to TIP, we have the Commission Against Human Trafficking as strengthened its ties with the Commission for Disciplinary Control and Security Forces and Service of Macao. And until now, there is no complaint or record of police complicity, neither at this body, which has also the function of supervise the law enforcement authorities, neither at the Ombudsman or neither at the Public Prosecutor's Office. Although we are doing some training and some workshops trying to prevent any involvement. Awareness campaigns have been also undertaken in 2012. On human trafficking, more than 33 workshops were conducted. More than 13,000 leaflets on combating human trafficking were also put to the public, the general public. 3,000 leaflets were done special on labor exploitation. And also we conducted more than 11 courses on law enforcement, and we have conducted also three workshops in general for NGOs, law enforcement, legal and other areas also to the general public. Regarding procurement, many of these measures also are to tackle not only the TIP but also exploitation of prostitution. The reports sets up the legal framework for the punishment of prostitution. We have, from 2008, we have 30 cases that were investigated. 2009, 36 cases, 2010, 40 cases, 2011, 36 cases, and 2012, around 35 cases. I cannot provide you yet the data regarding the sentence regarding procurement, but we will provide as soon as possible. But I can say that also there is a community program of the police to the local community and also to the associations in order to detect any case of procurement or any victim, either a child or a woman that can be a victim of sexual exploitation. This program of prevention and also to the community policing, it's a good program to also to ask the community to help us in fighting sexual exploitation and TIP. Thank you.
谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is about an answer, actually, to a question from Mr. Kaling concerning the maintenance of the national security law. The first point I'd like to make is that the purpose of our law is to strictly abide by the basic laws, clause number 23. 7 crimes are defined accordingly. In the process of lawmaking, one of the principles we follow is that we'll make sure that the residents of Macau will maintain and enjoy their basic interests and rights, which will not be affected, of course. When you talk about basic rights, those also include those included in the ICCPR. In making our laws, we also have conducted some comparative studies on laws.
对比了法国
including by comparing the laws from Germany, France, Italy, Portugal. We have also held public consultations. In particular, as to journalists, we have held a dedicated consultation on this theme by the Bar Association. So it's on a broad consensus that we have held a lawmaking process. Permit me now to come back to your question. The ICCPR has a core content, which is to tolerate peaceful and non-violent means to change the government. Our law on the protection of national security are on those violent acts and violent crimes. So
those cited by you, the peaceful demonstrations, protests, or strikes, are not in the scope of our law on the protection of national security. As what you mentioned on state secrets and the protection of these secrets, if you compare the Basic Law Article 23, it requires us to protect state secret. But in our legislation, state secrets are only limited to 3 types: national defense, external relations, and other matters pertaining to the relationship between the central authority and the Macao SAR. And the materials should have to be classified beforehand as secret documents. In other words, financial and business informations are not deemed as state secrets and protected as such. I would like to end my intervention quickly by saying that the last point, after the adoption of this law, there has been no case that was under this law, and no person has been prosecuted under this law. We have maintained the strengthening of training of our law enforcement personnel, and we hope that they will know that this will only deal with the most serious cases that pertains to national security. Thank you. Distinguished Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I would like to deal with the question raised by Mr. Flinterman on labor issues. There are many issues here. I would like to categorize them into 2 types. I would like to also seek your indulgence from Mr. Chairman yourself. Maybe I will be rather lengthy, but I will try to be brief. First, it's to non-resident workers, as to complaints from non-resident workers. From our replies, you can see that there are no complaints from non-resident workers. I would like to specify our situation. Last year, in the Labor Affairs Bureau, the total complaints were 9,488. Over half of them, that is 4,787 cases, are lodged by non-resident workers. But these complaints did not deal with discrimination. It was on other areas, mostly on wage issues, on their leave days, and on overtime. So we can say that we have devoted more than half of our time and of our personnel to help these non-resident workers to safeguard their rights. You are also concerned with figures about non-resident workers. Up to last year, end of last year, the figure was 110,552. 110,552. So mostly are from mainland China. And the figure is 66,000 847. And secondly, from the Philippines, which is 16,297 people. As to non-resident workers, as to their contract, labor contract, under our current system, non-resident workers, if they want to hold a legal work in Macau, then there should have to be a prior written contract between employee and the employer, and should be the basis for approval by the Labor Bureau on the basis of quota by non-resident workers. So before these non-resident workers enter into our territory, they should know by their written contract their legal rights. And I believe that members do know that in our law, it is stipulated that non-resident workers enjoy the same equal rights as our resident and local workers. And if you are interested, you may peruse the relevant content in our presentation. And as to new legislation, we have to stress that before enter into our territory to hold a occupation, non-resident workers, as far as the type of work, they should already have a clear decision on their occupation and on their job before they enter into the territory. So prior of their entry into our territory, they already have a free choice of their occupation. And non-resident workers are imported to compensate the shortage of labor. So that is why we have relevant laws and regulations to stabilize the situation, but it is in no way interfering into their free choice of occupation. Now I would like to pass on to my colleagues to respond to questions on children.
Answer to Mr. Kalin regarding internal security, regarding journalists and some Hong Kong activists that were refused to enter in Macau based on Law 9/2002 on internal security. In fact, our law says that someone that constitutes a threat to internal security can be not authorized to enter in Macau SR. They are not. The journalists are not refused to enter per se just because they are journalists. It's because they were identified. They have a profile that fits, that they are activists and that they can cause disturbance to public security. We can say that, I have to highlight that Macau, we have 7,000 persons that cross the border daily, that we have 2.5 million tourists per month, and we have a territory of 30 square meters. So everyone that is identified as posing a threat to disturbance of the public security, as to disorder, to incitement to disorder, or to radical demonstrations, it's not authorized. But I have to say and to highlight that in 10 years, only 586 refusals were based on this ground, which is a minimal number of refusals, concerning that we have more than 70,000 entries every day to Macau. Regarding the videotaping of the public demonstrations, and that is a operation by the police that is doing as an auxiliary public security measure in order to prevent any situation that can be raised or can happen during the movement of the crowd and any event on any disorder that can happen on the Pacific demonstration. We have to say that non-violent demonstrations it's permitted in Macau. We don't have any problem with non-violent demonstrations against the government. What we don't tolerate is violent demonstration. It is forbidden under the law of any jurisdiction. The police videotaping is also used as a policy strategy for flaws, for debriefing and to improvements, and is not targeted to record any person in specific. And this should be highlighted as well. And all the videotaping is according to law, in respect of Law 8/2005 on data protection, and also Law 2012 on videotaping on the CCTV on public areas. Regarding the arrest, regarding the recent event we had the VIP visits. We had some contingency plans and some strategy that were set up to prevent and to ensure the safety of the VIP visitor that we had, and also to ensure the safety of the population and enjoyment of rights and freedoms, and also the enjoyment and rights of freedoms of the tourists. Of course, these situations are a very careful thought, and profile of some activists are taken into account in case they use this opportunity to disturb public order and to cause any problem to the normal course of the ceremonies. So the case that you just have spoken, the persons involved with the police, they were asked to leave the place, that they were in the security area. They were asked to leave the place. They refused to leave the place based on the police order, and the police took those activists to the police station for identification. And we realize that every time there is a case, or when we don't have many cases of police misconduct, but when we have a situation of police misconduct, we have internal procedures. And in this specific recent case, there was an understanding that was a behavior that was a deviance from the guidelines set up by the police security regarding the demonstrations. And internal procedures were set up in order to seek if there is need for disciplinary measures. The Public Prosecutor's Office is also inquiring and taking investigation on the concrete case that happened just recently. And also we have the Commission to Supervise Law Enforcement Authorities that's also undertaking some measures to prevent future cases of some police misconduct. But we must highlight that freedom of assembly and manifestation in Macau is safeguarded and upheld, and the police respects the freedom of expression and freedom of association. And the incident that happened recently, conducted by some of the police agents, does not reflect the Macau SAR government position on manifestations, neither the police position on manifestations, and the freedom to express and to manifest their opinions. There are incidents that are being taken care. Training has been upheld and is going to be continuing in order to ensure that our police officers are capable of dealing with these situations in case of stress or of high level of the need of high level of improvement for these situations. Thank you. Sorry.
尊敬的
Honorable Chairman and members of the committee, I'm pleased to have this opportunity to explain the freedom of press in Macau SAR. As to the question concerned by Mr. Kalin, my colleague has already provided some explanation. I would like to supplement as follows. No matter who they are, overseas or local journalists, they all enjoy freedom of press and freedom of news coverage in Macau. I would like to specify that in law, it stipulates in the Article 27 of the Basic Law that the Macau residents enjoyed freedom of press, publication, and expression. And in the 1990 law and after the return, the law 790M on the publications also stipulate that journalists and media personnel have the right to seek information and to make news coverage. It guarantees the independence when they conduct their own duties. I would like to stress that the SAR government pays high attention to the freedom of press and the freedom of information circulation. We have strictly abided by the basic law and relevant laws to preserve the freedom of press. And we have also respected the independence of media personnel. As to their own internal operation, their freedom of seeking information, and their news reporting rights, we will not interfere and we will not restrain those rights. In addition to lawmaking, since the third term of our chief executive, we have also published a policy of sunshine policy. In February 2010, we have set up a system of spokesmen of the government, and we have also set up a relevant bureau for the spokesmen of the government, which guarantee that every sector can establish a focal point for communication in every government department, so that media can at any time contact a relevant person in the government so that they can pose questions and seek information. This policy was set up to have closer cooperation with the media so that the media can further enjoy their rights to seek information and to free press, so that the right of free press is guaranteed institutionally. In fact, since the return, the media sector has been very vigorous in Macau. No matter on the number of media outlets or on their discussions on all sectors of the Macau SAR, we have seen lots of progress. I would like here to also give you some figures. We have a rather small territory. We have only 30 square kilometers and with a very small population as well, with only 580,000 people also. But our media is very vigorous and is vibrant.
Today, there are 16 daily newspapers compared to the period before the return. There is an increase of 6 daily newspapers. They're published in Chinese, Portuguese, and English. In terms of electronic media, there is 1 TV station, 2 radios, 1 cable TV, and 4 satellite broadcasting companies based in Macau. In the cable TV and 3 satellite TV stations start their operation after the handover. At the same time, we see these media have increased their discussions on the questions in SAR, including the livelihood, the political, and the economic sphere. The distance between Macau and Hong Kong is really very short. The newspapers available in Hong Kong are freely available at the same day in Macau. Every day, at least 14 newspapers from Hong Kong are imported into Macau. Apart from the printing press, the TV stations, radio stations in Hong Kong also have a wide coverage in Macau. These informations I have provided to you is for the purpose of demonstrating the high degree of freedom of press enjoyed by Macau after the handover. With regard to the question of financial subsidies, I'm very glad to have this opportunity to give a little explanation on that subject. As a matter of fact, before the handover, the Macau government, before the handover, acted according to relevant provisions of the press law. In 1991, promulgated and implemented a policy of providing financial assistance to the periodic magazines. The purpose was to guarantee the independence of those magazines so that they are not influenced unduly by the political or economic forces. After the handover, in order to help the press in Macau to meet up the challenges that come from the neighboring areas of Macau in terms of competition, and in view of the impact brought in by the rapid development of telecommunication and information technology, we have tried hard to improve the professionalism and under the principle of maintaining the pluralistic nature of our press. The government of SAR, on the basis of the past practice, has improved the scheme of financial subsidies. The measures taken is to improve the human resources and to improve the content of the press. What I want to stress is our financial assistance is carried out for the purpose of supporting the independence of press to meet up the challenges posed by the competition from the neighboring areas and to improve the communication. We also provide professional training and medical guarantee in terms of medical care to the press. Under the press law, there is a stipulation on the abuse of information or the libel offense. These stipulations is to protect the rights that is guaranteed under the criminal code These are the explanation I would like to give. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to stress that the government of Macau SAR welcomes all criticism because this will help to improve the governance and the basic law as well as the local law protect the freedom of assembly. There's a member of the committee asked whether after the adoption of the law on the protection of national security, if there is any demonstration. There is 220 demonstration. As long as they are peaceful, there is no rejection from the police. In 2010, there were 504 assembly, 18 demonstration, and in 2011 there is 489 assembly and 28 demonstration. In 2012, 444 assembly and 26 demonstration. You can see from here that after the adoption of the relevant law, there is no restriction on demonstration or assembly. Apart from that, there is a question concerning the human rights organization. As a matter of fact, the right of assembly association is guaranteed. There are more than 54. There are 54 organizations. 5,000. More than 5,000 organizations in Macau. Apart from that, there are many other social groups whose purpose is to protect women, persons with disabilities, press, or the elderly, etc. During the preparation of this report, since many of the informations are needed, you can see from the report there are many figures in our report. During the preparation of the report, we requested different departments from the government, which in turn will get in touch with the NGOs within the purview of their work and provide necessary information for the preparation of this report. At the end of the formulation of this report, the report was put on the website for all the people, including the NGOs, to submit their opinions. Before we submit the report to your committee, all the NGOs are aware of the content of this report and have the possibility to raise their opinions. And after we receive the list of questions and the reply to this list, these have been put on the website, and the opinions from your committee will be provided to all the departments concerned, to the press and to the NGOs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ben Achu asked questions about the free education of children from migrants. I would like to answer the questions as follows. First of all, with regard to paragraph 116, we talk about the children of regular migrant workers. According to Article 21 of Law 9/2006, children of Macau are entitled to 15 years of free education. In paragraph 117, we were talking about the foreigners who are not Portuguese, who are not Macau residents. As long as their stay in Macau are over 90 days, they can apply for enrollment in a school that are not free. Since these people are not Macau residents, they do not have the right to enjoy free education. What I want to say is paragraph 116 and 117 would deal with two categories of people. In Macau SAR, it is prohibited to have any corporate punishment. The government has already taken a number of effective measures, including legal measures and the school operation manual, as well as the regulation and control by the Youth and Education Affairs Bureau. So far, no case of corporate punishment to students has been received. Thank you.
Thank you, Chan, and the delegation. We're all very much aware of the time. It's obviously not going to be possible to have another round of questions and answers, but I do want to allow 2 or 3 minutes for colleagues to ask follow-up questions that the delegation could then respond to in writing in the 48 hours that is allowed for that. Do any colleagues want to ask follow-up questions? I don't see any hands seeking follow-up questions, so Mr. Shani, you have the floor, sir.
Just a quick informative question. Thank you. I appreciate the information concerning the election reforms and the increase in the number of members, both in the LegCo or the Assembly and also in the election committee. I wish to point out that it's not just the question of how many members sit in this body, but how many of them are reflective of represent the electorate. And I do realize that there is a small increase in the percentage of directly elected representatives in the LegCo, but still the majority of the members still are not directly elected. And I have 2 follow-up questions. One is with respect to the election committee. How many members of the election committee are currently drawn from the ranks of the LegCo? I understand that under the 300 composition you have 16 members of the Legislative Council, which are members of the Electoral Committee, and now that the 10 new seats have been allocated to the 4th sector, and I wanted to know how many of these 10 seats would be allocated to members of the Legislative Council, and more perhaps generally, according to Annex 2 of the Basic Law, it appears as if any future reforms of the Basic Law do not need to get approved by mainland China, but rather that there has to be a decision by a 2/3 majority of the members of the Council and the consent of the chief executive, and then these decisions on changes in the election system would then be reported to the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress for the record. And my question is whether my reading of this text is accurate, or whether there is another provision in the Basic Law which requires that even changes in the election procedure for the Legislative Council should be pre-approved by mainland China. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. When the election committee is composed of 300 people, the member from the assembly, the Legislative Assembly was 16. Now it has increased to 22. As our head of delegation has said, Macau is a special administrative region, and China is a single political system, and the constitutional development will be decided by the central government as provided for in the Basic Law. In 2003, there is interpretation by the Standing Committee of the NPC. This interpretation was related to the Annex 1 and Annex 2, as you mentioned. There are 5 steps stipulated in this annex. The first is the chief executive shall be elected by a broadly representative election committee. And then the chief executive will submit a report to the standing committee to see if there's a need for the change of the method of election. And then the MPC will make a decision. The third step is to decide a scope according to this decision. After a public consultation with the society, the government will submit a modification to the Legislative Assembly to change Annex 2 and Annex 3. The fourth step is for the two-thirds members of the Legislative Assembly to adopt the modification and to submit to the chief executive for approval. And then is submitted to the standing committee of the MPC for approval or for record keeping. So any modification of Annex 2 in the legal procedure of the modification, there is the relationship between the Macau SAR government and then the central government is prescribed. Thank you.
Thank you to the delegation. We now go to the wrap-up. Your concluding statement, Madam Head of the Delegation, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, on behalf of the Macau delegation, I would like to thank the Human Rights Committee for the open, frank, and constructive dialogue during these 2 days. The Macau SAR government attaches great importance to the committee's assessment taken into the Macau's law policies and measures within the context of the ICCPR. Our government recognizes the importance of the reporting mechanism and takes into account the Human Rights Committee recommendations. It is the responsibility and continuous endeavor of our government to promote and protect the rights and freedoms of the residents, being committed with the enforcement of the ICCPR in our region. On behalf of the Macau delegation, I would like to convey to you, Mr. Chairman, and distinguished members, our wishes of a prosperous year 2013. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Now it falls to me to draw the proceedings to a close. This has been an excellent dialogue with an excellent delegation, a trilingual delegation. A remarkably balanced, gender-balanced delegation. In fact, it's not the usual minority. And all the delegation have given a lot of very important and valuable information, professional information, and clearly it's a responsible administration that has a lot of statistical information at its disposal, and it's been very useful to us. You'll have got some of the messages, I think, through the questions of colleagues, and it probably won't come as a surprise that not all concerns will necessarily have been dispelled by the very informative answers that we've given. This is without prejudice to the concluding observations that will be adopted by the committee and transmitted to Macau next week. Maybe I'll just comment on a couple of the issues that have emerged. One where I think we have perhaps been reassured is the understanding that the Anti-Corruption Commission is also separately an ombudsman. What we perhaps have less information about is what the ombudsman has actually been doing. And unfortunately, my particular tablet hasn't allowed me to download the 2011 report of the Ombudsman, though it is available on the web. But clearly, that is a dimension that we weren't aware of before, and it's very useful for us to know. The issue of interpretation of the basic law with the National People's Congress Standing Committee, just in general terms, to note that it always seems a little odd to this committee that a legislature should be responsible for interpreting its own legislation. That is not something that is easy to understand in terms of the approach of Article 2 of our covenant. I had been rather reassured until a moment ago that there had, when we'd been told that there'd been no request from the courts for interpretation by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, but we've just heard that in 2003 there was such an interpretation, or either that or the information came over wrongly in translation. Perhaps it wasn't an interpretation requested by the courts, but if it wasn't an interpretation requested by the courts, then it would have been interesting to know who requested the interpretation, since Article 143 of the Basic Law only envisages the courts seeking such an interpretation. The issues relating to universal suffrage obviously speak for themselves. It is a little hard to imagine that the impressive consultation that took place resulted in a reaction from the population at large that the election of the chief executive should be conducted by by 2/3 of 1% of the population. This isn't the normal attitude of populations to how they are governed. But of course, we recognise the existence of the reservation. The issues of freedom of expression. There's been very useful, a very useful exchange there, but equally. It's going to be a bit hard for colleagues to understand that somehow Hong Kong journalists are a threat to to the security of the special administrative region of Macao, but it was encouraging to hear that in respect of one incident, an important incident, apparently police disciplinary processes are being undertaken. That it'll be very interesting for the committee to know what the follow-up to that would be, and indeed as to whether that would then result in possibilities of reparation for the arrested person or persons. So those have been the main issues, I think, that have been of concern to colleagues, at least in terms of possibly still unanswered questions. Obviously, the whole issue of trafficking and the sex trade has been an issue, but I suspect there has been some reassurance about a certain seriousness of response by the authorities to that issue. So, as I say, without prejudice to the concluding observations, those are just the chair's personal reactions to a very interesting discussion with a very impressive professional delegation in the defence of its first initial report before us. I don't know if the Secretariat has any announcements to make before I... Very quick reminder. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Just to indicate that today at 2 there is the informal lunchtime briefing with NGOs on Peru in the usual room. Thank you.
And so with that, we take our leave of the delegation, wish them a safe return home, and look forward to their return next time. The meeting's